I'm going to start by talking about a topic which is, it will include quite a silly, dumb question, obvious question. You might even say that if I should ask this question in an opinion, then maybe I shouldn't be doing podcasting about mixed martial arts or combat sports in the first place to begin with, at least not at the moment. But the Floyd Mayweather versus Logan Paul fight, of course, hands down, it doesn't take any rocket scientists or genius to work out who's going to win. It's going to be Floyd Mayweather will take the win away from this fight, hands down. If Logan Paul were to win this fight, he would need a miracle to help him inside that ring. But as a novice to combat sports in general, I still felt like I needed to go and do my research, my homework on this, to just make sure that I knew the sorts of fighting styles of both guys. Floyd Mayweather, he's a force to be reckoned with within the sport of boxing, within the sport of combat sports. Logan Paul, watched his first fight, it wasn't only first. Can you call that guy a professional boxer? I personally, I don't call him or his idiot brother a professional boxer or boxers, because on paper they may be professional boxers, but they haven't really earned their stripes yet, as far as I'm concerned, in the sport. They haven't really fought any tough opponents to really actually test themselves to see how good they are, or see how good they really are. Before I can give them the proper label, the proper title, professional boxer. I personally, I wouldn't really call either one of them, either one of the Paul brothers, professional boxers. They might have licenses. They may be professional boxers on paper, but in reality, in the real world, no, at least not for me. You may have your own opinion, and that's fine. But my personal opinion is that no, they're not professional boxers. They're not at that level. Yeah, they're still far from it. So this fight between Floyd Mayweather and Logan Paul, not to repeat myself, but I personally believe, and I'm sure many people will agree with me, Floyd Mayweather will win. Now, I saw Logan's last fight against KSI. He looks really evasive in that fight, and KSI seems to be landing some really deadly, I wouldn't say deadly, but he seems to be landing some really heavy punches and some heavy blows, and Logan Paul seems really evasive, kept on more or less moving out of the way, fine, don't want to get hit, but he was not really getting in as much strikes or as many strikes as KSI was. And I think we're going to see the same thing here, at least with Floyd Mayweather, who is a professional boxer, who has been fighting for a very, very, very long time within the sport. I think, for someone who fights at Floyd Mayweather's level, Logan Paul would not like to be on the you wouldn't like to be on the receiving end of Floyd Mayweather's attacks in terms of his punches and strikes. Even though his reach may not be as long or as wide, far-reaching as that of Logan Paul's, and even though he's not as tall as Logan Paul, of course he's so Floyd Mayweather has the experience behind him. He still has the experience on his side. Of course, another different factor between the two guys this time, I think, in comparison to the former fight between KSI and Logan Paul, is the age. Floyd Mayweather is now in his mid-40s. Logan Paul's only about 25, 26, still in the peak of his youth. So he may have the stamina and the may be able to his cardio may be a little bit better, I guess, because of his age. But still, you can't. For me, you cannot write off the experience and just how good Floyd Mayweather is. There's not even any debate, because I was trying to have this sort of debate with somebody who I know, who they'll know who I'm talking about if they're watching or listening to this. I was trying to have this debate with them, which is why I started the beginning of this show, this podcast, by saying that if I actually have to ask this question, or if you actually have this discussion and ask this question, then maybe podcasting in mixed martial arts or combat sports is not something you should be doing at the moment. I completely get that, because looking at the two guys, one had basically grown up in boxing, the other guy didn't grow up in boxing at all, just that alone should give you a good idea as to who has the major upper hand, the major advantage in this matchup. So yeah, I mean, I say it'd be interesting to see. Well, it'd be interesting to see the obvious when it happens and how it will happen. This, I think, is an exhibition fight, so it won't really count towards. Although fine, they're going to get paid a large amount of money whoever wins. I mean, well, I say whoever wins. I think again, Floyd Mayweather will take away the win from this. So, but the purse is about $100 million. So even if there's a loser, whoever loses the fight, they're still going to go home with a really decent payout. So yeah, there's not much else to cover on that matter. But I mean, it'll be interesting to see. I do wonder if what happened at the press conference between Jake Paul and Floyd Mayweather. I mean, really, that was just to get more attention, get more eyes on the actual boxing match between Floyd Mayweather and his brother. And it was reported in the media and the news that after that altercation whatever you want to call that, just like a brief moment of stupidity for Jake Paul, and quite a few people called out Floyd Mayweather for reacting the way they did. Conor McGregor notably called him out, saying that, look, you know who you are. You are an accomplished boxer, an accomplished athlete in your sport, in your craft. You really do not need to bring yourself down to the level of this clown. You know, what the hell are you doing, reacting and overreacting the way you did? But I mean, that was just done. Jake Paul just did that just to get more hype on the fight, get more eyes on the whole event itself. But I think it was so bad that in the altercation, the argument that Floyd Mayweather actually said, "I'm going to kill that kid. The guy's a bum," just pissed him off so much. And it was reported that Logan Paul had actually drafted in and had hired 24/7 security. So I'm not sure if that's true or if it's actually true, or if that is just something he said for just for hype, again, for more attention, to get more attention, more eyes on this event. So on to the next point. And it's actually something I've talked about in one of my older podcasts, the Jon Jones issue and the Jon Jones matter surrounding the amount of money, the fight purse, the money he wants for to fight his next fight against Francis Ngannou. And initially he started off by asking for, let me say demanding, because he's an undefeated mixed martial arts fighter, both inside and outside of the UFC. I've got to stop saying. He demanded $50 million to start with, which, at least let me speak for myself, was a crazy amount of money to demand, and that's a big ask. I think Dana White and the UFC, they said no, they weren't budging, and Jon Jones was still pushing for that man. Then eventually, I think the man he wanted, he brought it down. All in all, they refused, and I think, so far as I can see, and I've actually looked all over the internet, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, Google. I think Dana White still refused to pay that amount, whatever amount he's requesting for. That's still too high, still too much. And in the meantime, of course, Jon Jones has been increasing his weight, preparing to fight at a heavyweight level. And I think after all said and done, he said, okay, fine, if that's the case, I'm going to take another year out of fighting and come back in the next year, when the sport's going to be even bigger, going to have bigger names fighting in the weight division that I'm currently training, preparing to meet that particular weight. So you see, why I was kind of like having like a to and fro with somebody on this about somebody on Instagram, and the point I was making is that well, despite how good you are in the sports, the Conor McGregors, the Jon Joneses, if the employer really doesn't want to pay you the amount of money you're requesting, they can I was saying they have less to lose than you, who's essentially, Jon Jones is an employee of the UFC. He fights for the UFC. The UFC are his employer. If they do feel they'll think they just don't want to pay the amount of money that you're demanding for, no matter how good you are at what you do, your job, again, they can. And I made the point that in this sport, mixed martial arts, there's newer, younger talent coming in virtually all the time. And if the UFC sees that they're good, they can throw all their attention on them, on those younger stars, and build them up into stars. As Chael Sonnen said in one of his own videos. But no, he's someone he's a retired fighter who I do listen to a lot. He said that sport, mixed martial arts, is about today, here and now, and here and now kind of gives you a good prediction, a good idea of what's to come. Not about the past. So I mean, Jon Jones could come back next year, but it depends. I mean, I kind of guessed this, and it's something I also heard elsewhere. I was surprised to see to see that other people actually thinking, kind of like showing the same opinions that I was having at the same time. He can come back whenever he wants to, I guess, or at least not after such a long period of time. When he does come back, what are things going to be like? I mean, when he does come back, will people still remember him? Or will people still think of him the same way? Will people still feel excited and enthusiastic about seeing him fight? Will they still, be looking forward to any of his future fights? And I've seen pictures of Jon Jones now that he's put on a significant amount of weight, even though he's still not achieved the particular weight within that heavyweight division, the heavyweight range that he wants to get to. And he looks very, very different to the physique he had before. Of course, he's transitioning from one particular weight to another weight, so obviously he will not look the same. But people are questioning, even I myself, I've wondered how the athleticism, the agility, and the athleticism alone, that's going to be affected quite a lot, because he looks very different. He looks like he's not going to be able to move as well as he could do before. From what I can see, I really want to say this without sounding like I don't know what I'm saying, but his physique, his body doesn't really look like it's let's say naturally molded for a heavyweight, an athlete, a mixed martial arts athlete that competes in the heavyweight division. It doesn't really really look that way at least from what I can see anyway. That's my opinion. So it does make me kind of wonder whether how he's gonna compete in that particular division, in the heavyweight division. He can go away and come back again at, say, in another year, in the next 2 years or so. But I mean, the sport would have changed by then. Again, like I said before, there's always newer, younger talent coming into the sport and rising up the ranks if you're good enough. And if they like you, if the UFC likes you, if Dana White likes you, if the fans like you, then the promotion will have no problem with promoting you and trying to build you up as much as they can do into a star. So there's going to be a lot of things that will change by the time he gets back into the sport after a year or 2 years. I mean, I can see that it's a sport that moves really, really quickly, really, really fast. Not just in the sport, but also in the community. There's lots of crazy shit that happens, a lot of the time. So and he's also got now a new negotiator, new advisor, who goes by the name. Let me address that properly. He is called Richard Schaefer. Now, he was the former CEO of the boxing promoter Golden Boy. Golden Boy, which is, as most people know, is a boxing promotion owned by veteran boxer Oscar De La Hoya, and he's someone who I'm going to talk about, make a few points afterwards. Just finishing off this point about Jon Jones. So he's a well-known figure in boxing. He was responsible for the events that included big names in boxing, including Floyd Mayweather, Oscar De La Hoya himself when he was still competing, Canelo Alvarez, Bernard Hopkins, Marco Antonio, and Juan Manuel Marquez. So he's someone who actually does know his stuff. He knows his knows how to negotiate, how to advise the athletes who he is representing, and he's also on good terms with Dana White. So I'm assuming, speaking for myself, this is someone who will be able to help Jon Jones' situation in terms of getting the sort of salary that he wants for this particular fight. So he's someone who potentially can help Jon Jones a lot. So let's just see how it goes. I believe that when Jon Jones returns, things will have changed in the sport a lot. I do personally believe that, and not forgetting what my friend told me when I was talking about the situation to him. I just say to him, look, if the employee really is just wasting the employer's time by whereby they keep pushing for something that the employer isn't really prepared to give them, such as a higher salary or more money for something, $50 million for a fight, no matter how good you are in whatever it is you're doing, whatever your craft may be. Excuse me. I said they could cut you and just move on. I made that point again. There's always newer, younger talent coming to the sport and rising up the ranks, so they can just throw their attention on those guys. Again, as a fighting promotion, especially when it's a promotion such as the UFC, and they've got a big chunk of the mixed martial arts market, they can get away with a lot. Many fighters do believe that unless you force in the UFC, whether you start in the UFC or whether you're going to the UFC, come out from another organization such as Bellator, PFL, or One Championship, then you haven't really cemented your name as an athlete in the sport of mixed martial arts. You will never really be known and given that proper recognition as a mixed martial arts athlete in the sport of mixed martial arts. And I can see that. I mean, a lot of the names who are well known in the sport of mixed martial arts, they're either in the UFC or they've been in the UFC, where they've made their name for themselves before moving to another promotion, before moving to Bellator, PFL, or a One Championship. So it's that's just, I'm guessing for the time being, that's just how the sport works. Now, Oscar De La Hoya versus GSP. Initially, this was a fight that I thought would have been exciting to watch and exciting to see. And when I heard about what these sorts of implications it would have for the UFC, I thought that, okay, this could actually probably, well, you can't be on top all the time. At some point you've got to pass the crown to another person. You can't have it good always. So when I say that, I mean that other fighting organizations could also rise up, and they could also be enjoying the sort of privileges and the sort of monopoly that the UFC has been enjoying for such a long time. And from what I've seen, again, as a novice fight fan, looking at things from the outside, I've seen that the UFC doesn't necessarily have, well, first of all, they don't necessarily have the best fighters in the sport, and secondly, they don't necessarily always host the best events. Even the main cards on some nights, they're UFC Vegas's fight nights or UFC 262, UFC whatever. Even the main headlining main event, co-main event, have not always been that great. I think for the past month or so far, in this year alone of 2021, a lot of the fight cards, at least the main fight cards, and that main fight card, the main event and the co-main event, have not been that entertaining. It's been quite dull. So, and then, I've been looking at other organizations, again, PFL, One Championship, Bellator, and it's quite disheartening that when you watch the fights, when you watch the events, and you actually watch the fighters of other organizations, not necessarily just the UFC, but you look at the events of other organizations, and I'm really impressed. I'm really entertained and really happy with the sort of events I'm seeing, how the fighters perform, and they fight really well. It's although this may not mean much to many people, it's quite annoying to me that this organization and that effect trickles down to the fighters. These guys do not get the recognition that they deserve for the sorts of events they put on, and for the fighters, for how they perform. They're really good at what they do, but because of the organization that they're in, and because of the organization just doing the best they can do, because again, it's also down to branding, how well you're known as a brand. It's quite unfair, and just because the UFC has that sort of monopoly in the market, they can get away with so much. They got that star power with their brand alone, and so many people be anticipating huge fights, and they tune in every Saturday or Sunday night, and they're quite dismayed with the performance that they're seeing inside the octagon. So going back, I kind of went off on a tangent there, but going back to the main points I started this with, GSP versus the Oscar De La Hoya. So initially the fight was blocked, and it was blocked by Dana White because I think he was thinking of things from a business standpoint of view. If someone like GSP, who's a very well known, accomplished, and respected, one of the greatest mixed martial arts fighters of all time, especially in the UFC, if he does lose the fight against Oscar De La Hoya, well, it's not going to have a good look for him, and the organization could lose a lot of star power. Excuse me, star power, and of course, it will be testament that this organization doesn't necessarily have or host the best events or have the best fighters. Even though this guy's been retired, GSP trains all the time, even now that he's not really competing. Oscar De La Hoya, on the other hand, is a boxer. And initially, my last podcast, I said that I like this guy. He seems very likable, very polite, really well spoken, classy, and quite happy all the time. But the one thing that I didn't know, and this is testament to always doing more research, and I should have done that in the podcast, before doing that podcast, I didn't know that this guy has a drug problem, problem with substance abuse, alcoholism, and cocaine. And really, I should have seen this or picked this up in the last commentary that he did for the Steve Cunningham Frank Mir fight. And he was sitting there in a commentary with Snoop Dogg and I can't remember the name of the other guy doing the commentating with them, but he was just not shouting, but he was almost like talking and kind of going a bit too far with how he was commentating in the fight, using the word baby when it's talking about the fights, how they're performing inside the ring there. And it seems so weird. This person seems to be erratic, quite, let's say, excessively happy. They're really happy when it's just a boxing match. Fine, of course you there to have a good time, but they seem to be having too much of a good time, as in they've taken something before they sat down there to do the commentating, and they're just not their normal selves. It just sounded weird and bizarre. And I think before this, I think he had it was initially reported that he had actually got himself sobered up. He had cleaned himself up, but obviously after seeing this now, even though he apologized about it later, he clearly hasn't really sobered up or isn't completely clean yet. But that's also something I didn't know about Oscar De La Hoya, and he's about 48 years old now, so there's quite a significant age gap between the two guys, and I can now understand why nobody will really want to see that fight. I even put out a poll on my Instagram stories just about a week ago and I asked a question: who would like to see this fight? Just a simple question, yes or no, and I got a 100% for no. So seeing that, doing a bit more background work and research and homework on these two guys on this event itself, I can now understand the reason as to why this fight would be a bad idea, especially for the UFC. They'd lose a lot of money, a lot of credibility, and it'll just be a bad look for the company and be a bad look for George St Pierre, because he's such a well-respected, such an accomplished mixed martial arts athlete, even though he's retired at the moment. So yeah, now the last point I wanted to make before wrapping things up is the JOSHFABIA situation. We're back here again. I mean, there's not much to say really, except for the fact that I don't think, I don't think it's the last that the interview he gave with is it Summer Helen or Helen Summers on the Behind the Scenes podcast with she did it with another guy, I think his name's Bear or something. I can't remember, but decent guy, but I just can't remember his name. He did an interview with those two guys, and really he just made the whole situation worse. He threw Diego Sanchez under the bus and just basically shat and shit all over Diego Sanchez. Diego Sanchez had nothing but, I think, only positive things to say about JOSHFABIA. Didn't insult or discredit the guy or disrespect the guy at all in his most recent statement about the whole situation, where he confirmed he had cut ties with JOSHFABIA. But JOSHFABIA just immediately the following day afterwards went onto an interview behind the scenes and just insulted and disrespected Diego Sanchez. So a lot of people, even myself, are quite annoyed by that, and really for someone like me, it has exposed JOSHFABIA's true colours, because I actually sent out a message to him to have on my podcast. I admit my podcast is still very small. My YouTube channel is still a very small platform, but I'm still grateful for the subscribers I have subscribed to my channel so far. I'm still very grateful for that. But I reached out to him. I reached out to him and I asked him to come to the show just so I could hear his side of the story, because so far at the time I could only hear the mainstream media base seemed quite biased and was basically painting him as a villain. So at the time I thought, let me hear his side of the story. No one else has already done that, and he said okay, we could do that. But more or less later on when I asked him again, he said no, not this time. Then after I saw that interview that he did with Behind the Scenes, and after seeing it, I'm actually glad that I didn't have him on my show, because he seems like a really, 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 really unpleasant person, really unpleasant character. But the point I'm making really overall here is that I don't think it's the last we're going to hear of JOSHFABIA. I think he's still going to try and milk the opportunity that he's just the resulting sort of 15 minutes of fame he's enjoyed since kind of leeching onto Diego Sanchez. And even though they've cut ties now, I'm sure he's still going to feel like he can benefit from the situation by just spreading more, whether it's lies or spreading more sorts of private information about Diego Sanchez. So but anyway, I have to wait and see what happens. So guys, I'm going to wrap things up here. Again, I apologize for being so tongue twisted when I'm saying this podcast. I think I really need to wet my throat before doing the show. So if you did enjoy my content, if you did enjoy this podcast, this episode, please don't forget to leave a like. Don't forget to subscribe. It really helps my channel grow and my podcast grow when you do that. Only subscribe and like if you want to. I want the following to be genuine. I want it to be, I prefer it to be authentic. You can catch me on Instagram. My name's IkeJarko1. On Twitter, my name's IkeJarko. And on Facebook, my name's IkeJarko. You can listen to my podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iTunes, and Google Podcasts. And I think in some place at the moment, it's my audio and my videos are being shared into other platforms as well. So once again, guys, thank you.